That's the bigger part of it now. But I'm a lawyer, and this is the firm that I practiced with, and I'm still a counsel at that firm.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Alright.
So we'll let him finish up that form.
Is this where you guys were yesterday?
No, we were downstairs in the big open space.
It's being set up for our summer fundraiser that happens on Thursday night. So.
Thank you. And that was just for you
Yes.
to keep it. Just a little information about
Okay,
our program and what we hope to do this summer.
good. I didn't make notes.
Are you ready?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, we could just have you start out by introducing yourself, who you are, and what you do.
You have some water. Let me just stop you a second. Let me get some.
Okay.
Because that'll make it easier for all of us.
Cool window panes.
This is from yesterday's lunch with Langers. So I know it's water, and I know it's still. If you want some, I'll get it.
Oh, no, well, thank you.
Okay. So, you wanted me to begin with my name and.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, nice self-introduction.
Sure. I'm JohnScripp, SCRIPP, and I live at 3123 North Marietta, Unit 3 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I have lived on the east side since about 1970 or 1976, depending on where you draw the line between the east side and River West. We spent about 4 or 5 years on the river, on the west side of it, before we found a place, Newport Avenue, where we could start to get our children in school. We moved there so that our eldest daughter, who was born there, and son, could go to school at Hartford Avenue School, which was, at that time, the best reputed to be the best of Milwaukee's public schools. And we got there in 1976, enrolled the kids at Hartford, and the desegregation order came in to desegregate Milwaukee's public schools, and no sooner did we get there that the next year we joined hundreds of people on the east side who voluntarily bused their kids from the east side to schools around the city, and that were in order to integrate them. And our kids took our kids to Lloyd Street School, which is on 12th and Lloyd. And it was about as far from Hartford Avenue and the surroundings as you could get. And the short of it is that we went through the troubled process, and it wasn't the community that was causing the trouble. It was the pressure of the staff and teachers and the system to accommodate this. And we we had a great community meeting and settled everything down, and then all our kids ended up at least starting at Lloyd, and going on from there to ultimately to Rufus King High School. And the kids, we have 5 children, 4 that were reasonably close together, and then 10 years later there was our son John, who's just turned 28 and is getting married this October. Going to have his bachelor party this weekend, and so they had gone to. We had one daughter who went to Minnesota to play soccer up there on the first women's team, and John went to Madison to play soccer. He told us, and he told us after a year, and he looked at us and said, "Dad," we said, "Why are you going to leave the team?" And he said, "Well, I thought you were coming here to play soccer." And he looked at us, and just the wisdom of youth was right there. He said, "Dad, soccer got me into Madison. I'm here to learn, you know. And besides, it's beating the hell out of my body." Yeah, so we had 4 Badgers and 1 Gopher out of our family. So we were Milwaukee schooled, all in MPS except for John, who was the soccer hotshot at the end, and he ended up going to Marquette High, and then played on three state championship teams there. So that's now we have I'm married to Susan, and she is. We've been married since 1967. She is the mother of the 5 children. She was a teacher at NMPS, and she retired. We have 2 of our daughters live within 3 blocks of our house, but they upgraded substantially in both cases. When our first children were first one was married, we thought we didn't know how our children were going to be able to sustain the standard of living that they'd become accustomed to. After the second one was married, we knew that they weren't. They were going to blow right by it, you know. So they've been fortunate to have to marry partners that have been driven, and together they've made good teams. And so we've got one set that's a son who lives in Green Bay, comes down here fairly regularly for soccer and swimming, and with our grandchildren, 4 up there. We have 5 grandchildren who live within 3 blocks of us. And we have 1 grandson who's out in California. And we have our family has loved the neighborhood. They stayed, and they loved it enough that in the case of the 2 girls here, their husbands were from Glendale or River Hills, but chose with them to live in the city and live on the east side. And so it makes for a very rich life. And we get to do something that I had when I grew up in Chicago, which was that we lived in a flat in a building that was owned by my grandfather and grandmother, and they lived downstairs. And nothing could be better to have your grandfather who took care of you, who's, from the time that you were this to the time, could help me in sometimes when I got older, and so I thought I get to be grandpa, and that's what it's been. It's been really, it was a place that people talk about retiring and going somewhere. I couldn't think of a better place to be. It's like I have the lake and the park. I have my kids, my grandkids. Have this place. It's wonderful. The other part of that is that my daughters are both active in the community, and so they've seen what I've done over the years, and my wife has done with her friends and in the community, and they just dive right in. And it's not strange. It's not something that they're afraid of. It's just it doesn't mean it's fun. Sometimes it is, but one of them says, Dad, I found that there are people who are talkers, and there are people who are doers. and, yeah, you find it out. Right? You find out which ones are which. Right? So, I'm a lawyer by profession. I have practiced always a fairly consistent area has been real estate and land use. But for the last 20 years, I spent most of my concentration in environmental matters. Environmental land use the line is very close. And so while doing that, I had the ability to become active in the community and things from with my kids, coaching soccer and that sort of stuff, and then in the what was the predecessor to the historic Water Tower neighborhood, the Water Tower Landmark Trust, Water Tower Preservation Fund, and I was the president of the Water Tower at the time that this place became decommissioned in 1993, 1994. I was either just outgoing, and John Bach, my friend John Bach, was coming in, or we've been, somewhere in there. We were both involved, and we thought that this place, we knew of this place as we knew it was a lighthouse. It was a place in the park, but it was different from the park because there was something going on here. There were people living here. Turns out there were Coast Guard people living here, families. When I got to town in the early 70s, I remember the light going through, and it would go through some people's bedrooms, and some people loved that, some people hated that, right? And then I always remembered the foghorn, and I thought, well, that must be connected with this. I found out later it's not, but that's another story. And we had a couple of proposals that were floated to use this place for. One was for a youth hostel, in connection, and it'd be a great idea to have a youth hostel in connection with the Summerfest, that young people could come from all over the world and they could stay right here while they enjoyed that. You can imagine what the people across the street, would have been saying about that. There were one was a B&B, bed and breakfast. One was I can't remember the others, but they were very definitely the answer was no from the community, and so I said, and enough people agreed with me that you can't just say no, because sooner or later somebody's going to come by with something, and they're not going to take your no, and they'll have a good enough program that they'll get it through, and it may not be what you want. So if you want to do this the right way, we should figure out what we want to have happen here, and then try to find somebody to do it. So we had short of it was we were looking around for someone to help guide us into this process, determining what we should do. And we were members of the Water Tower Landmark Trust, Historic Water Tower Neighborhood, and the early members of Lake Park Friends. We had a joint committee. We had not worked together before, but we knew a lot of people together. So we met with in this committee with the then county supervisor Penny Padell, who's still around but lives up in Shorewood, and we met usually at a place called the Coffee Trader, which is now Via on Downer. And the Coffee Trader on the east side, and this is part of East Side lore because it was the first happening place on Downer Avenue that I knew of. It was open. There was used to call it California type food, or not quite natural food, but close. It wasn't sliders, and nice tea, coffee, and a place you could get a drink. So people spent a lot of time there, and that was a good meeting place. And we'd meet there with a couple of representatives from the county staff, as well as Penny, and we decided that we needed some help in guiding us I remember I went to Chuck Engberg, who's an architect in town, and who until just very recently lived on Shepherd, south of Hartford, and now lives down in one of the high rises down on the river. And he's a prominent architect in town, Engberg Anderson. And Chuck said, I said, who can I get? I need a planner or an architect. And Chuck said, I'd like to help you, but you don't need a professional, an architect or a other planner, because you've got smart people here. You just need somebody to help you figure out what you want to do. You need a facilitator. And again, short. This is very short. We located a man who was coming off of being a very successful county supervisor, and now is the president of the CEO of the Market Center, Paul Matthews. We hired Paul. We hired him with money that we got in a grant from the Dan Hone Foundation. Who's Dan Hone? Dan Hone. Daniel Hone was the last and longest socialist mayor of Milwaukee. His grandson, Dan Steininger, lives on the east side with his wife, Judy, who's a professor at MSOE and writer. And Dan had left his law practice and he was the CEO of the Catholic Knights Insurance Company, Dan had a foundation that was set up at his grandfather's death. He granted us the money that we needed to pay for Paul's plan, pay for Paul's services. We conducted the services, and we conducted the process, and came up with a plan. We told the county what it was, and we asked the county for an option to rent the facility, to restore the facility at our cost, and then to rent it on a long-term lease and operate it all at no cost to the county. We just thought, we can do that, or somebody can do that. So we had the plan was a good plan. It was to preserve the property as a historic site, and it was to make the building available to the public, and to make it available to the community as a meeting place. It was to be done, as I said, without cost to the county or to the taxpayers. And the county granted us an option. That was sometime around 1998, 1999. And we started working, and it seemed like a long time, but it really wasn't. It was a few years of trying to begin to figure out how to raise money, and to take it a little further, because we looked around. The idea was to figure out what should happen here and then find somebody to do it. The second part was harder than the first part. And so we decided, well, let's take it a little further and let's keep going. And so we did that. We had our first fundraiser in Cudahy Towers at a wonderful apartment that has a patio below it overlooking the lake, and that was our first attempt. And some of those same people who attended that and supported us are still supporting us now. That took us so far. We got to I think we got to the point where we knew we needed a more concrete vision of what this project would look like, so that we could get people to make bigger investments in it. And we were toying, not toying. We used some of the money. We were going to use some of the money that we'd raised at FAR to hire, at that point, probably Engberg and his firm to come up with renditions of what this might look like, what we thought this would look like, and we started doing that. And that was going to take quite a commitment, because it was, what you learn is, in anything that you build, it's what you want to come out that is got to be considered. Otherwise, you're not going to be satisfied with what does come out on the end. And it would take a lot of work and a lot of more research about learning the story of this place to answer that. And about the same time, there was we learned that there was a funding process it was then called ICE-T. It was the acronym for Intermodal something Transportation Enhancement Act, and it was part of the Federal Highway Fund, Federal Highway Act, that the short of it is that there's millions and millions of dollars given to each state each year by federal highway taxes, and as a bone to the people who oppose simply feathering the nest of concrete pavers and wanted to make some substantial improvement to the transportation system. Congress created this transportation enhancement program that says 15% of all the money you get has to go for transportation enhancements. And what are those? Well, they're like new mass transit facilities, mass transit plans, bikeways, all that kind of stuff. And there's restoration of historic transportation-related facilities. And what's that? Well, it clearly is a railroad station. That's how a lot of railroad stations get restored. But when you read the law further, you find that it's only surface transportation here, but surface is anything but air. So water is surface, and just before us, we had seen that there was an old little lighthouse up on Potawatomi Light on Rock Island, north of Washington Island, that is probably one of the oldest lighthouses on the lakes. And it got restored with a T grant, Transportation Enhancement Grant, with a combination of community and DNR. And so we did. We hired another one of I don't know, where did we get the money? I'm not sure where we had it. We probably in what we raised, and we hired another guy, Mike. I'll think of his name, to help us put the grant application together, and that, it's a grant. It's a grant. It's a document. I'm a lawyer. I can do that. And Mike is in development, and he understood how to couch it and how to make it look good. And then we also knew that this is a competition. There's like $15 million available to the whole state, and there's 70 applicants for it. And we're looking to get 1.2 million out of that. So we put on a press. That we, as me and some members of our board. So you talk to everybody you could think of who might have some influence on the committee that was formed to make this decision. And it would help if you had people who were connected with those who were on the Democratic and Republican side, because the Republicans were in at the time, to support this project. It turned out we succeeded in what I think was certainly the best public governmental relations effort I was ever part of. And people you went to got people to help you. We had both Tom Barrett and Scott Walker helping, and Tommy Thompson and Scott and it was it was really a good effort. We were the highest rated, and we got fully funded. And we thought, oh, that's great. Well, it turns out that you do this in partnership with a public sponsor. There has to be a public entity that will agree to be responsible for the beginning and the end of this project, even if it costs more than what the grant provides. And the grant provides 80-20 financing. So to start out with, somebody's got to come up with $250,000 to be that the local match part, and then somebody's got to be available in case it overruns to pay the excess. And we said, okay, we'll do that. And we can live with the county as the owner. That's appropriate because the county owns. I missed a step. This land here, until 2003, was all owned by the federal government, all the way down to the lake, right across Lincoln Memorial Drive, down to the lakeshore, and that was part of why I was kind of slated to do what I've done here, is that I could see that there's no way that this property can do anything else but be part of this park, and that the county has to get it. And the only way the county can get it from the federal government is if it preserves it for certain purposes and respects the history of the site, because it's on the historic register, and it is historic. So you could see that it was sort of like, okay, this is it's sort of like a path. This has got to happen, this has got to happen, this has got to happen. So in the process that I was describing, we were learning more about the place, and we were the local color for the county, who had to make the application to the federal government to acquire the property, and we were also the preservationists who were going to come up with a plan to preserve it, and that's going on at the same time we're raising the money, at the same time we're getting the grant, and we're roughly the same time we start the process of actually putting together plans with the county as the owner. And the county made a decision. The funding would pay for construction and would pay for architectural planning. The county made a decision to say that their people at the DPW, Department of Public Works, would be the architects, and they would get the pay that was provided in that grant for that purpose. So it was interesting because you had the county was wearing multiple hats. They by then became the owner of the property. They were obligated to carry out the grant, but they had us as the people who were coming up with the match and were committed to pay the balance at the other side. And yet they were also being able to charge against that fund for their own services. So it was interesting. The short of it, that's the short answer. We got good results, good services. It wasn't always the first time. We didn't get a lot of experience on cost, and so we were spending time trying to construct what we couldn't afford. And as it turned out, we didn't need it, we couldn't get it. We came up with plans, and we always had, we always kept our base informed with the base organizations, the Lake Park Friends and the Water Tower Landmark Trust. But in the process of our doing this, there were always a few people on the Water Tower Landmark Trust side who had opposed the project from the beginning, and they never, ever, were satisfied with approving it or supporting it. But it's a democratic organization. It's you act by your votes of your members and your trustees or your directors, and then usually you go ahead and support the project. It becomes your project. This is a part of local history that is often forgotten or never realized because few people get the chance to live in the community as long as I have. What happens is that the same people who are opposed to a process, they use every opportunity that they can get, any public forum, to raise the same objections, even though they had raised the same objections before and were voted out, or were superseded. They don't care, Even though they're members or directors of the organization, they don't care. This is what I think. This is what I'm going to say. But in general, there was support, tolerance, at least tolerance, for the project, and there were plenty of opportunities for what amounted to being a federal or state-funded project to have public input into the process. There were many meetings. There were meetings before the City of Milwaukee Historic Preservation Commission, and we had other meetings on our own. And you get the point that the few people who opposed it didn't like the idea that there was going to be an attraction that would bring people streaming into this facility in the middle of their neighborhood as they looked at it. And I suppose they also didn't think that we were capable of doing what we've done. That it was sort of if it can happen bad, it will happen bad, was their conclusion. In other words, if it could go this way or this way, if this way is a bad way, that's where it's going, because you're not going to be able to do anything more than that. And I had a very frank conversation with one person who I knew was a staunch historic preservationist. And I said, why? How can you? This is history. Or against changes to the park, and we would say, wait a minute, this place existed before the park. It is part of a reason why Milwaukee exists. This brought people to Milwaukee. So there isn't anything more historic than this. Well, the answer was, it's not in my backyard. So ultimately, one of the greatest benefits that we had was from a planner that made us go out and survey the community. And the last thing you want to do when you've got an organization that has, now we have an organization that has half from the community and half are historic lighthouse enthusiasts who don't know much about the community. The community don't care. They care about this place. Is you go out and survey the community and ask them for their opinion. So we structured it, went out on Saturday morning and went to the place, went to the people, and all in this vicinity, and we came back and totaled it up, and there were we had about 95% approval, and it was, there were only a few that squeaked out the disapproval, and that was a very important backstop, because it not only confirmed what I'd hoped was the reality, but it also gave us something to point to. Right? Is it, what's a survey? It's how you conduct it. But it was fairly structured and fairly open, and we just went and asked and got the results. So it was something that we said, well, this is what we did. This is what they told us. So don't tell me that everybody doesn't like it. That's an important part of this. It's not like I did this alone. There have been some people who have been with it as long as I, almost, and one who I learned to know and love, Marcia Coles, whose name is on the community meeting room of the center of the Lake Park Bistro. And I equate Marcia along with some other people like Ilse Ankel, who's over with the Urban Ecology Center. She's not with it. She was a pillar of why it remained alive, and Marcia was that way with Lake Park, the Lake Park Friends. She was part of the founding of that organization, and it's I call these people sometimes prophets, because they see a truth and they have a commitment to something, and you can be as logical and pragmatic as you can be. They don't care. They ain't changing. They'll find a way to do the right thing, in their view, even if they become a pain, where, and a burr under the saddle, but they're very strong, very intelligent, very committed people. Marcia was a director, one of our group from the beginning, and she died a couple of years ago. Actually, she died now it's been 5 years ago. She died on there are spirits. We do not have I don't think we are one of these, people always want to find ghosts, ghost hunters, and they always want to come to the lighthouse, old lighthouse, and that's great, and we keep saying, get out of here. There are no ghosts here, we no record of any ghosts or spirits, and we do avoid it. But we do get to the point where when that bell that's downstairs, when it was being brought in it weighs 800 pounds, and it was being hand rolled in on a cart from a truck through the door. It had to be angled just right to get it inside. Before it got inside, we set it up there, and we're banging the bell because it hasn't been sounded in 30, 40 years, and it wasn't going to be sounded again when it got in our place. And it's wonderful. It's got this resonance. It's not like it's the highest, it's just a deep resonance that comes through. And so we get that in, and we put it inside, not a nick, nothing. It's up there, it's put in place. All this time, Marcia is dying over in St. Mary's of cancer. She never smoked. She died of lung cancer. And just at the time, I find out that day when I go to see her that she's died. And I said, when? And she died about the same time that we were banging that bell. So it was, talk about a spirit, you know, I told that story at her funeral, and her boys, the father had just died, who was not a joiner, he was a curmudgeon, and I think she put up with a lot, Elliot. But the boys that the two of them raised in the community are, one's at Harvard and one's somewhere else. They're both successful, and they are now supporters of this lighthouse, and they are because they know what their mother put into it, you know, and it's a lot more than money. It was angst and commitment and spirit and things like that. So there are spirits like that. There are spirits like the Vivian Langers was the wife of Norb Langers, who was in here yesterday, and Norb was here with his daughters, his three daughters. Vivian had died about 2 months ago. Back before we constructed, before we got together and got the money to construct, we had a visit, an open house, and it got good press we got good press from the AP. It was on the AP. When we're here, Vivian comes through with a crew of people from Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association. Those are people who grew up in lighthouses. And Vivian tells us that she grew up here. In 1930, her father was the first of the auxiliary keepers who came on to take care of the harbor light. This was her bedroom right there, in that room on the side to the right. Mm. This was how she would jump up and see she would jump up here when she was a little girl to see the cars, and they called them Tin Lizzies, that would go across the Lake Drive. Lake Drive was, what was here was the drive in the park. These line bridges were wider then, and they had two-way traffic. And this was the proverbial Sunday drive. This is where people came to take a drive along the lake. And you'll see more about this park, about old historic pictures of strolling in the park and band shells and all that. That's where this happened. So this place was just, was right in the heart of it, but not exactly part of it. You know, there was actually when they develop the park, they got an easement from the federal government to lay the park out across it. And it was always covered, always contained by a fence that stayed there until the 1990s, till after we took over the facility. And Vivian told us she told us graphically where the fog horn was. We said, didn't you get scared by the fog horn? She said, well, yes, but not when you think. When she was about 3, her father took her to on the government launch to go out to the breakwater light, and they went up there, and he created a nice little cot for her. She lay down and went to sleep for the night until, which was right under her. So that's where the light is. That's where the foghorn is. It's out there, and so that kind of a story just it just comes back, and it gets reinforced when their families come through and retell the story and provide pictures and we've now collected pictures and stories of her father's being the keeper at other lights and what life was like there, and her father was keeper on duty at the time that he's probably the last person to see the car ferry Milwaukee go off in 1929 when it lost all 50 people aboard, and whole crew. So, it's just, that's me. Just a second, I'll get this. Oh, excuse me. Let's just ignore that one. Okay, I'm sorry. So to bring this forward, we've had some very, very good people who worked as our executive director, or now what we call our operations manager. May Klisch is that person now. And you don't get May without her family. And she has 2 daughters who are at Sherwood High, and they're great kids. And and you get sometimes you get Sherwood High bands and entertainment, that she can get and be part of festivities here. And her last name is Klisch, Klisch, and I knew that name before we interviewed her, and I just thought maybe it's the same. There is a brewery called Lakefront Brewery, and there is one of their beers is Klisch Pilsner, and I said, could it be that you're related to? I said, that's my husband. We own the brewery. Oh. This is like made in heaven. And Russ is a great guy and very generous, and we have been blessed to have a steady supply of lakefront here for our events, and he's in the community and in a historic building and or district, and so. It fits, and we got into through May, and Russ, we got into the local first movement, and that allowed us to realize that we are a business. We're a charity, but we have a part of it, a service that we sell, and one of them is as a meeting facility, and so. People can, in addition to being a place where people can come and tour, so that's been a good thing for us to make contacts with people and to keep our mindset like businesses, that like a small business is, that you got to hustle, and if you don't hustle, you don't exist, and you got to keep at it. So, and May's been perfect for that. We've got Jerry Olson, who's one of our event planners, is our event planner. That we have weddings here, small weddings. They have to fit. So far we have them conduct them discreetly. We try to keep the action this way, this on the lakeside, and whatever we do has got to leave open the park path. So, you know, if you're renting a place, you could have somebody riding through, and that's okay. You know that's part of getting it. And we have, what we look for is finding other uses for the place that are appropriate to fit. May's idea was to get together with a couple of other women who had businesses to have something called a Strong Women's Retreat. And I don't know if you call it a retreat, but it was whatever it was. Strong Women was in it. And it was aimed at people who, it was probably women who'd been through some experiences, and maybe some rough ones, that they could reach inside however they wanted to, wherever they needed to. And so they pull that together out of a feeling that people have had that this was a healing place. Georgia Stebbins, whose face is on that in the middle of the Keeper's Corners, was dying in New York of consumption in the 1870s, and she was told that if she was going to live, she had to get out of the city. Her father had just become the lighthouse keeper here at North Point. She came out, and almost as soon as she got here, his health started to fail, and hers got better. And she gradually took over, being the acting keeper, and then had the title of acting keeper. Not too long after that, became the lighthouse keeper of North Point, and stayed here until 1904. And she was here when the lighthouse was still out on the bluff, and here for the first 15 years when it was located here, and raised a whole family. It was this kind of, and a wonderful family, a very strong family, who ultimately came back, has been supporters of this project and brought some of her stuff back, and been wonderful. But it's a healing place. It's a place for retreats, for businesses when they want to have a planning session, where when you want to meet with somebody, you want to entertain a few people in a special client, and you want to get to a place where they can concentrate on what you're talking about. And I mean, you get distracted, but the distractions, you know that they're going to be there. They're just phenomenal beauty. So it's so beautiful that you almost become immune to it. Because of course it's there, and so those uses, parties, people, anniversaries, we have, May has a sort of a description of what events can be held here, and they're all small They're all contained and they're in keeping with the site. And we do things in each case, in each wedding case, on a case-by-case basis. If it looks like it's not going to fit, like it wants something that we aren't, then that ends sooner than later. So this place was rededicated to the public in November of 2007. By that time, we had substantially constructed the improvements, and we were not yet ready to open until later in that spring for public tours, but we were all on the porch down at the lower level, standing on the porch. Were we on the? Yeah, we're standing on the porch on the lower level, and we had all the county officials, the same mayor and county exec Walker, at the time, and we had Buzz Stebbins, who's George's great-grandson, who was a West Pointer in his mid-80s, but 6'4" Ramrod Street, with his wife down there, and we rededicated to the public because this was part of. This is just a segue. This was part of that area that's Marcia Cole's room below the Lake Park Bistro. That didn't come easy. That was held on to by the community, and Marcia did a lot of that to as a cost of approving the lease to Bartolotta. And when that was happening when this became available. And some of us, maybe me, felt like, well, I'm not going to let this one go. We're going to see if we can continue it as for the community, for the public. And so it's been this, it's a connection. It's spirits, but spirits connected from work and life experiences. It's not like somebody is here and haunting the place. No, it's like this. It's like you might be. Hopefully, you're too young to have, but it's like your mother or your grandmother who's maybe gone, but they're not gone.
Well, this is all really interesting that you're saying, and I think going back a little bit about the lake and then the importance of this place. If I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that this place is kind of a spot to connect to the past, as well as concentrate on the things you need to do, but at the same time appreciate the beauty of the lake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is we say that this is a window to the past. And what that means is that in a very short time, you can come into it and realize how not too long ago, things were very, very different. Mind-blowing different. No electricity different. Right? And then, so people get here and they see that, wow, this generation did it. And they learn about the wrecks, and they learn about the transport, and they learn about that was the only way to travel. And those were those boats, those schooners, were the semi-trailers for the country. And so our hope is that particularly young people can see quickly and right in front of them how this is a nice place, it feels comfortable, it's good, but it was tough. It was difficult. Living was not easy. And you come away with what? Not, the object is you come away with the feeling that said, well, maybe I shouldn't be as worried as I am about how things are going to turn out. Because they didn't know how things were going to turn out. They just kept going. And so that is, to give some, what I say is, to give hopefully young people some perspective. You worry, you're going to have to worry and fight and stress because that's part of life. But have some confidence that it'll probably be okay. It'll get through, and maybe even grand. You may surprise yourself. And then this place, this park was where we took our kids and were there growing up, and we coached soccer and Little League baseball and all that stuff. And we went to there were sock hops at the for our kids, and we did where it's now the bistro. My wife and her bridge club that rarely played bridge decided when our kids were about 16 and were ending up going to parties at people's houses when they were out of town and having the police come and drinking and all this stuff, that there wasn't appropriate place for them to have dances that everybody there thought they remembered when they were kids. Churches and Ys and things like that. And so they decided to have dances at the pavilion. And we had formed another organization. This one was called Pavilion Parents for Teens. And we chose that because we thought it was cute, because someone thought it was cute because they knew that there was a Broadway play called that was something like what a cat would say, and we had as many as 600 kids go through the pavilion for a dance. We had kids come from 6-7 counties around because it was a wonderful place. It was safe, it started off being run by the women had organized it, and they had the men taking tickets and doing. No, actually, the men were doing watchman duties. We had bathroom duty and parking lot duty, and the little brothers and little sisters, they made out because they ran a coat check in the basement, and whereas now the Kohl's Center, and we went through we had a couple of them, and we had some bad experiences. We had some kids who were obviously drunk and got sick in the place and passed out, and we thought, oh, this is not working. So one of the best thing that we ever did was that they hired a RTM heavy security, and these basically were people who did rock concert security, and their people came to, and they were all either about 6'3" and about 240, or they were about 5'10" and about 240. and in any respect, they were big. And they didn't have the same problem that we had because they just treated these kids like they would at a rock concert. And so they searched them, and they found the stuff and they got rid of it. And we did this for a couple of years, for several years, until our kids went through the pipeline. And so this was a place that had, you'd go for there were political meetings there that were held and we had a meeting when my friend John Bach and I went to the what used to be the Century food store on Downer, was now the EVS, and at that point it was going to be, there was a press on to change it into a Jewel Osco, and John and I talked to Otto, who was the purveyor of the Century store there, and Otto had brought the bike races to Milwaukee and Wisconsin that you'll see later in the summer. And we said, Otto, what's happening? Do you want to do this? No, because the landlord was going to kick him out. So that started another neighborhood effort with a eclectic group of people who, there were mothers, even who weren't mothers, didn't have children, who were collecting children to picket the Century at on Downer. We had great press, and the day that we had scheduled for a meeting here at the bistro, there's a stage up there. We just found out that they had agreed not to do it until Otto could stay, and so it was. So the bistro was. It was like, and the place was packed with people. And John Bach and I get to walk back up to the stage, and we get to tell the news. And it's a story that, if you've ever seen any Frank Capra movies, look for them. They're classics, and they are of the power of people and what they can do. Frank Capra did that Christmas Story, the one about Jimmy Stewart. That's the Frank Capra type, where you come together and so we came together and we won. I said, you won. They heard you coming. So this is a community that has people who care, and more important, they take action. They are talented people. It's a good community to raise your kids in because people are trying to do at least as good for their kids as was done for them. And so we operate in this milieu, and we respect it, and we're going through a lot of planning here, and we're making plans 5 years ahead. How long will it continue? I don't have a lot of concern for some of the same reasons that I knew that I felt this had to happen. That now that it's here, and people are beginning to understand what this place meant and means, there will be a support for it. There'll be people who will say, yeah, I'll work for that. And it's what I didn't, one part of what we're doing here is we're trying to do our roadway. We were going to we were going to make our roadway into our facility in our parking area. Originally, in 2006, 2007, we wanted to pave it with a material that was porous, that would enable the groundwater to be better collected along the system itself, and not run down into the two ravines that go down into the lake. And when and we weren't able to do it at the time. We didn't have the money, and it was probably lucky because the technology's improved since then. And when we first tried when we first discovered and confirmed its importance, was when the UWM school had a study going on. A woman named Sandra McClellan, who's a professor at the Great Lakes Institute, was they had been retained to try to determine whether there was a cause and effect relationship between the closings of Bradford Beach and the overflows from the sewage district, and which was always the big, it's the sewage district. That was the bogey. It was the sewage district. What their tests showed that it didn't matter whether there was overflow or not. The nutrients that came here and created the nesting place for the gulls to crap in and to have it germinate into E. coli on the beach was all local, and it was drainage that came down from the bluffs, from the drive, and the nutrients that came down from it that combined with the dog and mostly bird waste on the beach that did some things that weren't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to. E. coli wasn't supposed to be able to survive for very long, and the sun should kill them. But they learned that sometimes it isn't sunny, and that some of it would get into the deeper sand, and so when I went to the public meetings and I heard this, and I said, yeah, I know where that water is, because I know the ravine, and I was then a marathoner, and so I ran everywhere. And I would run up through the ravines. I could see the water coming down, and I saw, yep, there's the water. It goes right down there, and there's no water on the west side of the drive because it's going onto the east side of the drive. It's going onto the drive and up to the east. So we were sitting here. I said, perfect. We're sitting here with two ravines on either side. They're both historic ravines because this park was full of ravines. There were like 7. And a number of them have been filled. The golf course was filled. That was a big ravine through there. And they're ravines because they are drainage. And they were creeks or unnamed creeks that were coming through. And so we got, I said, oh, I know where that is. And you could go across to the other side, walk across from the drive, the opposite the North Ravine, and there's a space at the end of the beach that is heavily vegetated. It's where it dumps, it's always green. That's because it's got nutrients, they put in, and so they used it as one of the places to be a kind of rain garden or rain swale, and so to my thinking, it's, oh, that's great. We've got to do more of this because we could help it further by keeping more up here. When they did put those in, they put in some swales in the park on the top of the bluff. There is a rain garden outside here near a tree right in our west lawn. But I thought we could do more than that. So we're working on that now, and what I hope is that we will have we'll have this. Not only will we have this project done, and it will be nice. It'll be better than a gravel road to get to. It'll be better for things with wheels, you know. And it's not. I'm not talking about cars, you know. But more importantly, or just as importantly, it will be. We put up a sign, or a small, concise exhibit that does a reinforcement to the signs that are around different areas here, but gives the big picture of how it all comes down into there. Right from here, this is here so that it doesn't, you know, or that it slows it down, and to reinforce the lesson that we're trying to, the hard environmental lesson that is the hardest. We're good about pointing out point source pollutant and the pipe pollution, but we're not very good about getting at the polluters, you know, for our cars, our lawns, our junk, our almost, you know, the hard choices have to be made, and they're not so hard once you realize what the cost is and that it's worth the cost, you know. So that's why it, you know, that's why it all fits, you know. It just all fits. And it isn't like there aren't more important things to do. It's that this is an important thing to do, and I can do it. So it's kind of a, this lighthouse was kind of, it became, you'll find this when you get into doing extra things. You may already be doing them. Things that are beyond your job and that you're beyond your routine, and you say, oh, how much of this can I do? You know, I got other commitments, and that's, you just gotta kind of manage it as much as you can take, and maybe sometimes walk away from it. But sometimes there'll be something that says, I gotta do this. This is a mission, you know. And the mission means it's somewhere between the military term and the religious term. You know, that where this is something I got to do. It's my duty.
Do you think your background or your work with environmental issues played a part in that?
Yes. Environmental and land use, because I could see it was. I worked with titles to real estate for a long time, and I knew, and I would always, I think my brain works better with a map, with a picture, and I like to, so I always liked in other real estate deals to like to go back and look at what the background was and how it fit in the community or the surrounding properties. What's its value? How does it work? You know, how does it fit? So it was definitely part of that. You could say, oh, don't tell me that. That's not going to happen. You know, that's never going to work because nobody can afford it. You know, and or nobody will permit it. You know, so it helps to that is the legal experience was very helpful. The environmental experience is also helpful, but it makes it even more rewarding because you can see a direct relationship between something that you have the power to control or affect and a good or a bad. You know. So yeah, that's good. It's taught me a lot. When people tell you to stay positive, you know, yeah. When we had opposition, it was never one that would go after the people and point them out, or you just said, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do it the right way. You know? So stay positive. And then with people, same things with volunteers. That Marcia said one of her last lessons to people was, she said, thank you, volunteers, and then thank them, and then thank them some more. It's very simple, very simple. Yeah. So you learn those things, and you learn them. I used to say sincerely at the end. It's now thank you. And sometimes even if you're not a volunteer, you know, just for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. So, you have any other questions?
Do you have anything?
I guess, well, the only thing that I was wondering about as you were talking about that your legal background as well as your environmental background both helped you see the direct relationships. Could you tell me like what you see at stake if the water goes in, if the polluted water goes into the lake, or if this place wasn't kept up? What is at stake here?
With the water, what we're proposing to do here will help. It won't. If it isn't done, I think we'll still make Bradford Beach a reality and preserve the public amenities there. But this will make it more certain, and more importantly, this will make the lessons of what it's necessary to keep that more palatable, more edible, you know, and more broadly appreciated than the here and there signs that are put up over individual rain gardens or swales. And I think we will be, I'm confident that despite the carp and despite the other potential invasive species, we'll continue to have a valued resource of the lake that will be inspiring, refreshing, and I don't mean that from jumping in it, I mean just from being near it, for years to come. It may not be the same, because you saw what happened with invasive species, how fast it could go, you know. And maybe we'll be sparing those damn carp, you know, who knows, you know. But people will be engaged in trying to do the best they can to preserve it. This place, we were having a talk when we first tried to figure out what we needed to exist by terms of money. We thought, well, what could we do? Well, we know what it costs to operate a program here and have an active community and really a full use of the facility. And we're still doing that on a shoestring. We know that if we couldn't do it anymore, we could close up the place. Its story would be locked inside, except that people would see this pretty exterior, as long as somebody would pay the money to do the maintenance and to open it up once or twice a year for some kind of public celebration, right? So yeah, we could go away and it would stay. But like the lake, I'm confident that this community would not allow it to go into such disrepair that it would be gone. But the difference between that and what we have, which is growing, and I don't mean that in terms of dollars or size or people, but the stories that are coming here and getting told are just richer and richer, just like Norm Langer's coming back with his kids, and sitting here where his wife ran around 80 years ago, in the time sequence that we think is meaningful for this place, because it's way different than what it is now. So those kinds of things just keep happening, and our people, our directors, are not. There's two of about 10 who are still pretty long term. One with me from the beginning, but the other back to the Lake Park Friends group. But the others come in and they have a passion, they have skill. They don't live here. We have a young woman lives in Greenfield who works for Quadratics and is a very sharp CPA and is into it. We have people coming from who've never lived on the east side and who come in and spend lots of time. We have Mark Keene, who spent time here as a kid when his uncle was in the Coast Guard here, and so it's I hope that those stories get picked up and get improved, and that the place is better, we figure out ways to better tell the story and get people in to see it. And we find out that telling a story or giving people tours and getting them to respond, to talk with you about what they see, is enriching. It helps you understand the story better yourself. Mike Connor, who you will talk to. Mike, I wait for Mike's report of who he sees on Sunday and where they're from, and I know how he is, and I know what I can see that he's made a connection, with somebody, and that's worthwhile. It's a good connection. It's like we do the Easter egg hunt We do a Victorian Christmas, Victorian holiday, where there are educational events for children, and we see 50 or 60 young kids sitting at tables out there making Christmas ornaments. And this happens year after year. And that's your future. You know, they'll remember that. So it's like marketing 101 right there. This is the farm system, right? We go back to the farm. And so all that stuff, it works. So I'm not, I'm not worried because the worst wouldn't be so bad, but the best could be so much better.
Is there anything else you can think of that you think we've left out or haven't asked you?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to get this stuff off my chest. Because sometimes you don't know it's all there until you get the opportunity to see how it fits, to tell it and see how it's woven together, And I appreciate that. I'd be interested in seeing what the result is from your work.
We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Good. Good.
True that sometimes you just don't know what the bigger picture is until.
Right. Until you're asked.
Yeah.
How does that fit?
Right.
Well, that's how that happened. That's why I got together this week at Patty's. It's a bar on Murray. And with Jerry Broderick, who's the county supervisor, and Jerry's an old friend. And that's one of the reasons why we're such good friends, is that we've been through a lot together, and a lot of it has been common, our kids raising and politics and things like that. And so it's, when you get a chance to, you feel the commonality of it all. It's what drives you to keep at it.
Yeah. It's kind of one of the reasons, I don't know where I'm going to go yet, but I've been thinking about pursuing environmental things, and it's true, the way you put it was so well said, that when you have an understanding of the environment and the way it all works, you really see the direct connection there.
And you at least see way things should flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Right. No, I really, exactly. So where are you now? What are you in school?
Actually, I'm going to be a freshman at UWM this fall.
Oh wow.
So and we have a bunch of master's students, but I'm thinking about majoring in community education, to continue this kind of mission that you guys have of educating people about stories and the importance of place. So
yeah, that's a great vocation. Yeah, and you don't know where that takes you.
Oh, yeah.
How about yourself?
I'm a second-year master's student in public history. So my focus is historic preservation.
Good. My historic preservation work came from the Historic Preservation Commission, old houses, and then this on a more concrete level, and then I've been, for about the last 6 years, I've been part of something called the Root Pike Watershed Initiative Network. And it's a nonprofit that works for the improvement of the watersheds basically from Oak Creek on down to the state line, in the Root River, Pike River, Racine, and Kenosha. And in the last few years has been very active in the planning process to prepare restoration plans for those rivers and cooperate with something called Sweetwater up here that is doing a restoration plan for the KK and doing work on the Menominee, and will be doing some work on the Milwaukee. But those are the ones that have had the least work done and need more work. So that's another one of those things where the attraction is that it's something that you've worked with over time, and now you can see how it fits, and you can bring along with other people like yourself who come from different fields. There's DNR people, there are people who are from the Sierra Club and from other small municipalities, who are trying to put it together. That you can do a lot with. You got a lot because you can focus your authority. I use that in a very limited sense. You don't have any authority, but you have respect, and you're in this for the good, not for other purposes. And so, if you keep at it steadily, you'll be a respected voice, and you'll have the opportunity to guide improvement. Guide it, force it, not force it. Guide it.
Yeah, you'd be able to be dictator after a while.
No. So who's next for you?
We're actually done for today.
Oh.
Yeah, we're done. So
We're back in the classroom this afternoon.
Okay.
So
Tell me your names again. Do you have them written down somewhere? Can you write them down?
yeah, sure thing. I can write mine down for sure. Got my pen right here. Yeah, I'd be interested in talking to you more actually about the environmental.
Sure. Be happy to do that. Just give me a call.
Okay.
You
And
can,
actually,
you can tell I'm not hard to talk to.
Okay.
Well, have you met May? May Bush?
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
you too.
All right. So you're coming tonight?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have about, 20?
right.
15 students
Yeah.
plus some other.
Right. Archie said to let you know that he'll be around at 6 o'clock to
Okay.
help you set up.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yes.
And then did you look at the setup downstairs? No?
No.
I was here yesterday and interviewed Mark, and
Right.
so we got to see
You
it
got it,
downstairs.
okay.
There.
So the screen and
I
the
think,
projector,
yeah.
everything? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, then we'll see you tonight too. I'll be there.
All right.
Yeah, I actually won't be able to be here. I have to go back to. I live in Tosa and I'm tutoring, so.
All right.
But
So 6 o'clock urgently here. Okay.
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
Yep.
All right.
Good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Same here.
All right.
All right, let's head out.
Yep. This is the surrounding sounds for the North Point Lighthouse. These are the sounds of one of the ravines in Lake Park. sounds of Bradford Beach on Tuesday, June 18th at 12:14 p.m. It's sunny and cool and a little bit windy, and the beach is mostly empty. These are the sounds of the North Point Water Tower.